Now we're going to move on to our session 2 here. Our speaker is Holly Firestone, and currently she is head of community at Venafi. She will be speaking to us about building community, your competitive advantage today. Holly will share her experience building the community for Atlassian, Salesforce, and now Venafi, digging into how these companies built their communities. You'll get a high-level overview of the most important things to think about as you build community, including ROI, team structure and roles, engagement, incentivization, and resources. And I'm really excited for this one because community is a big part of my job too. So Holly Firestone, please join us.
Hi there. Can you hear me all good? You can see my screen and everything?
I don't see your screen. I see you though. Here comes your screen.
Okay, perfect. So first, I'll just start with, y'all have to forgive me. I have some kind of weird allergy, something going on as we tend to do in Austin. So I'm a little scratchy, as you can see. But I'm really excited to be here. Let's make sure I can actually advance my slides. So I am Holly Firestone, and I have all my links below, my LinkedIn, my Twitter. HollyFirestone.com is to my blog, which has a ton of information about some of the stuff I'm going to cover today. So just to get started, a little about me, so you know I'm not completely a fraud here. I started building community in 2010 for a nonprofit, and I've had the pleasure of building community for some really, really incredible companies. Atlassian, I was building their user group program, which is the main pillar of their community. And then at Salesforce, I started with the user group and MVP programs, and then was running their online and kind of extended community and community team as well. And now I'm at Venafi, which is a security startup, building their community strategy from scratch. So a lot of experience kind of all over the place, but always in this software sphere, most recently in this software sphere. And I have built community teams. That's something that I am really proud of and share a lot about in my blog as well, if that's something that is interesting for you. And then most importantly, out of everything, proud Texan. I think we all are. If you're from Texas, you're proud of it. And an Austinite. I'm very, very excited to be speaking at my first Austin Startup Week, being that I've lived in Austin for a while. So go. My slides are awkwardly advancing slowly, so I'll just have to think of awkward things to do in between while we're waiting. So community is defined in a ton of different ways, but for the sake of this presentation and this audience, this is how I define B2B community, and that's individuals that are connected through a network of platforms, programs, and resources. These platforms, programs, and resources give members the power to build together, support one another, contribute to business goals, and find their paths to success alongside other members. You know what? I actually just realized also we skipped my slow advancing made us skip 2 slides. So I'm going to hop back just for a second, just so we can kind of set the stage here. So this is the stuff that I'm going to be covering. I think it's really important. This is community 101, basically, just really high level overview of community. And if you wanted to start it, what you generally need to know and some of the basics. So that's what I'm going to be covering here. There's a lot more. We could do a lot deeper dive into a bunch of this stuff, but at least wanted to just mention that I think it's important to know. So now moving into the basics. Now you know how I define community, especially for this audience. And then this is something that I find really, really important about community, which is community is about members connecting to each other. So for years and years, social media and community management have gotten a little bit muddled, and it's definitely getting better. For our industry, it's kind of a thorn in our side though, because social media and community are not the same thing. Social media is really about building a channel for you and your audience. And about building an audience, and community is about taking that audience and connecting them to each other. So actually really, really different. You're not necessarily building an audience with the community. It's more focused on them finding value in what they can do together. And another slow advancing of slides. I need to come up with like some theme music or something for this. Not sure I'm even plugged in, so. Okay, this is a really, it's a favorite quote of mine, actually. It's from Mark Benioff, who's the CEO of Salesforce. It comes from a book called Play Bigger, which is about companies that have built their own market or built their own category. And he says it's an emotional attachment, and that's the asset that can't be stolen by any competitor. Salesforce has one of the most successful communities in the world, and it's a very important part of the business, and that has had a profound impact on the business as well. You can build a product, and a competitor can come in and they can build a similar product and charge less for it. And that's something that you really can't necessarily fight off. It happens. But when you build something like a community, when you build ways for your customers to emotionally attach to your business, that's something that can't be replicated. It's not something that can be stolen by a competitor in the way that some other pieces can. I'll drink while these slow slides are advancing, I guess. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to do a very general overview of, some of the elements of building community. Won't do a super deep dive, but get a little bit more into it. So there's a ton of different types of community programs. When you're getting started, you usually pick one or two, and that's where you build. But then there's a million other things that you can do and add in, and these are just some examples of them, some of the most popular ones I would say. So I won't go through all of these, but starting with some of my favorites. So Top Contributors Program is a program that will reward and recognize people in your community for contributing at absolutely exceptional levels. And we'll talk about what exactly it means to contribute to a community. So user groups are another great community program. So that's, you have a customer that is, they are volunteering their time to run local meetups in their area. They're managing everything, the agenda, the logistics. Are they going to serve pizza? Are they going to have beer? Like every single piece of that is being managed by volunteers, all over the world, if that's where your audience lives. Excuse me, and you're giving them tools and resources to be able to do that. And that's one that's really near and dear to my heart. I mentioned at Atlassian that I was running their user group program. So that's really how I think I got my kind of start in community management and tech. And then when I went over to Salesforce, I saw a lot of potential in the user groups and user group programs. So we really shifted our strategic focus to those, because you have to think people are leaving work, and instead of going home, they're going somewhere to talk about your product and your company. Like there's nothing, stronger than that, really. It's a real serious dedication of time from your customer's part. So I really strongly believe in the power of user groups. And even now in virtual times, user groups still exist. And you see them happening everywhere. So I find those to be really valuable and exciting. Forums is another really popular one. So that's where people in your community are asking and answering each other's questions. And then skip over to, let's talk about mentorship. So you've got people that are, top contributors, as I mentioned, in a top contributors program, or just people that are experts in using your products. They've been using them forever. And so they've got a lot of knowledge about them. And then you've got people that are new to the community and to your products. And so matching people up in the community to teach and learn from each other is a really, really exciting way to leverage your community, and a great program that you can build. And sorry if I'm whipping through these so fast. I want to have time for everything and questions. Excuse me. Another great one is ideas. So products plays a huge role in community, and a lot of different businesses have an ideas channel or platform where customers can submit their ideas, and then other customers will vote them up and down. So they'll say, like, this is an idea I really care about, I'm going to give it a vote, or this one's not so important to me, I'll vote it down. And then your product team, usually when they reach a certain threshold of likes, will go review those, and they will decide what ends up making it into the product and does it. But you always get to close the loop back with your community and explain why. And it gives your community a feeling of ownership in your company and your products that you're building. All right, so a bunch there, but keep going. So you may be wondering, why are people doing this? Why are they top contributors in your community, or leading user groups, or do they want to be mentors? So Osnap is an incentivization framework that I came up with. And I think that all of these different elements have to be implemented in your community to help incentivize people to participate. There's a presentation that I give that I literally just talk about this concept. So this is a pretty loaded slide. We won't be able to dig too deep into it, but I do want to cover some of these so you at least know what they are. I also have a blog post about this if you want a deep dive. But starting with ownership, giving your community and empowering your community to be able to have some ownership in the programs that you're running in your community, giving them control over things, even if you can't, say just go run wild with it, still being able to give them some say in the direction of these programs that they're participating in gives them ownership. Just like, ideas will give your community members ownership in the product. They care about the direction of the community too. So giving them opportunities to give feedback and actually using it's very important. And then public status. So things like public recognition. So badges, industry and peer recognition, recommendations and endorsements and things like that are really exciting for people as well. They want something that they can be proud of, that they can put on their resume. And then next is networking. So you've got this incredible group of people that are contributing at really high levels in your community. And so networking becomes a really important piece to them because they want to talk to other like-minded individuals. They want a smaller community where it's just this kind of top level of people that are experts in the product and, have been around for a while, really well known in the community. Because there's a ton of benefit of that. There's obviously knowledge sharing at a higher level than you can imagine anywhere else, and employment opportunities. So if something opens up somewhere, usually everybody there is in the know of what's going on. Camaraderie, mentorship, and support. So all really important pieces of building out this smaller community within the community for people that are contributing at high levels. The next one is access. So I think this is actually the most important one. And your community is really, especially if they're contributing heavily, they're really invested in your product. They care a lot about, the direction that you're going as a business. And so giving them access to see product roadmaps early or, meeting with executives and product managers, that stuff's really important to them. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily open all of this up to your whole community, depending on the size and your goals. But if you do have a smaller group of top contributors, you can have them sign an NDA and show them roadmaps early and get feedback, which is hugely important to your product team to be building the things that your customers really want. And then last is perks. I think this one's probably the least important in this whole incentivization strategy. So that's, swag or free certifications and training or event tickets. That stuff's all really, really nice. But, from the feedback I've gotten from the communities I've worked with, not as important as the rest of these things. But none of this works at all without the foundation, the bottom layer of intrinsic motivation. People actually have to want to give back to your community, which is, a really important piece of this. So intrinsic motivation is what leads to authentic engagement. And I have an example I have a few examples, of course, but one example that I'll give you is forums. So you've got someone that's really excited to get some kind of rank or they want a free t-shirt. So they're going to go to your forums and they're going to answer as many questions as they can as quickly as possible. So they can get to 100 questions and they're ranking high and you're going to send them a t-shirt, whatever. Then you've got another person that's contributing by answering questions on the forums. But what they're doing is they're thoughtfully answering the questions. So they're going through and they're giving really detailed answers. They're adding screenshots and then they circle back later to make sure that person got what they needed to be successful. You may get 100 questions answered one way and 5 answered the other way, but that 5 is going to be way more valuable to your community than the other one. So you can't just expect to throw t-shirts at people and they're going to contribute in the right way. You really want to focus on people who have the right motivations to give back. And then those other pieces are just great ways to reward them. And, when you start a community, you're going to have people trickling in and liking things or just looking at things. And, these things don't necessarily motivate them. It takes the small kindle of engagement and, turn it into a much more roaring fire, basically. So taking what already exists and making it bigger versus creating something out of nothing, if that makes sense. Kind of going in a circle with that, but it's really about getting people to contribute at a higher level, not just contribute at all. That's going to happen slowly throughout your community as you grow. And these slide advances are killing me. Sorry, y'all. There we go. So intrinsic motivation obviously is very important to get the kind of engagement that you want. And you can't just really pull that out of thin air. You can't create that. You can't build it into your program, but you can influence it. And part of influencing it is comes from your company and your company values. So a lot of companies, they have a list of values, and it's something that they point to all the time. They talk about them internally, externally. If you have a set of values that you're not talking about externally, you probably want to change your values, because you need something that you're really proud of to really set your culture straight and set your culture right at your company. So, you go to any company and say, do you have values? Yeah, we have values. We value this and this, but really ones that drive the direction of your company, drive the direction of your culture, that have meaning, that you use, that you talk about, that you lean on and point to. Those are so important, obviously, for you as a business, but then you also have to think about the way that it impacts your community. And that's how you get people to connect to your community in a more meaningful level, is that you take your values as a company, and those get woven into the fabric of your community. And people have an emotional connection and a real tie into what your business is doing, and they want to contribute to that. So if as a business, diversity and inclusion is something that's really important to you, that shows up in your community, especially if you're talking about it. You're not being quiet about it, but you're letting people know this is what we believe, and we'll take a stand on this. So those things show up in your community, and that builds the culture of your community. And that's what helps people really have the best connection that they possibly can, to contribute in a meaningful way. They want to help other people. They want to give back, because that's part of what you value as a company. Oh, that one went fast. Okay. So moving into the building piece. How are we in time? We're great. So developing community is like building a product. I love this analogy because I think a lot of people can relate to it. And it's very hard sometimes to really, kind of look at community at a higher level and understand what goes into building a community. To think about building a community, you have to do research. You have to actually build the community, get feedback, testing, bugs, add new features to your community, build out documentation, market your community, support your community, all these things that you would do like you would do with a product. And that's not just talking about like a community platform, that you're going to stand up, but every element of your community, every program in your community requires all of these different pieces for it to be built successfully. And so in terms of building for success, you have to invest. It's not just going to magically appear, just like marketing doesn't magically appear, just like a product doesn't magically appear. You have to invest in building community, and that means you need budget for things like platforms, different tools, marketing. You have to market your community to get people in, and building out your branding in your community. Hiring is an essential piece, and I'll talk about that momentarily. Building out your strategy. So really understanding what the strategy is, what business goals it's going to tie to, and which elements you want to build it into your community first. And then, of course, partnerships. So community needs to be on everybody's radar in a business. And so that means different teams are going to participate in a community, and they need to be bought in on it. And then you need to figure out how you're going to align with them. They need to know what's expected of them. Like product team is a great example. Like I said, if you have something like ideas and the product team isn't bought into reviewing those ideas and responding to the community, you're not really going to be successful there. So alignment across the business is really, really important. So when I even bring up marketing in the budget, there's external marketing, of course, to get people in the community, but there's a ton of work that has to go in internal marketing too, to make sure people know what the community is and understand how to engage with it, or what levers they can pull to get value out of it. I mentioned I would talk about hiring a little bit. Going back to building a product, you would not hire someone to be a developer or a product manager if they didn't have any technical experience, right? So that comes up here in community. Especially if you're building a community from scratch and you need to build a community strategy, community experience becomes very, very important. Too often we'll see, usually in marketing, that someone just kind of gets community pushed onto their plate, and it's either, their full-time role or part-time role. And they're just kind of learning as they go and trying to build community. And it doesn't mean those communities won't work, but they will never reach their full potential that they could without an experienced community professional at the helm, really understanding how to drive the strategy versus just, building some engagement on a platform. So, if you're thinking about doing this, that's something that I would think about as well is, is what the approach is there. And now 10 years ago when I started doing this, there was not a ton of people out there that had a ton of experience. And even now, you're not going to find many people that have 10, 15 years of experience in building community for businesses, especially at large B2B software companies. But the industry has grown massively, and there are tons of people, thousands probably now, with really good community experience under their belt that would be a great, a great experienced person to bring onto a team to start building out a community. I can't stress that enough. And, right now I say there's all these people out there doing it, but community is very, it's the hot topic right now, I guess, because when everything started this year, everybody was trying to figure out, okay, we have all these events now, how do we move things online? And building community became all of a sudden a huge priority for so many different businesses. And you're seeing VCs that are throwing money, at community focused businesses or community or companies that are building community platforms, things like that. And so hiring is probably becoming a little bit more difficult because everybody's kind of on the hunt for community professionals right now, which obviously I find really exciting. But they're out there, and there's a lot to be said for hiring someone that has that experience versus not, because you'll just get so much more out of your community, and they're already attached to a network of people. And we're very supportive community, which I know is very meta. So here's some examples of community team roles. Obviously, if you're just getting started, you're not going to hire 8 to 10 people right off the bat. But my recommendation is you want to hire a community strategist, which would be your chief community officer, your head or VP of community, and a community manager. There's a lot about each of these roles. Community manager can take on a bunch of different, there's just different types of community managers, I would say. When I was at Salesforce, I had a community manager that was focused on product, so building the bridge between the product team and the community. A community manager that was focused on content, so getting the right content to the community, which is extremely important, but then taking the really good content that the community members were creating that and getting that back to the business. And then I also had a community manager that was focused on engagement. So all of the rewards and recognition programs and different things that we were doing in the community to engage our customers. And then under an engagement community manager would be a community moderator. So if you have an online community, it's really important to have moderators to see what's going on in the community. Things can spin out of control really fast, as I'm sure a lot of you have seen and heard examples of that before. So as your community is flagging things, somebody needs to be able to review them. And that becomes a very big role the bigger that you get. That's where automation will come in somewhat, but you still need humans to be able to do that piece of community management. So lots of good stuff here. I could talk about these roles for 100 years. But again, like if you're really just getting started, you need someone that's going to be the strategist, and that's the visionary across the entire business. And then someone that is working on nurturing and building the community as, the strategy pieces are being figured out. Oh, yeah, okay. Maybe this will work. All right. Maybe it's the gifts that are doing it, but I'd rather be awkward than not use them. So I'm telling you to throw your money at community, not all your money, but I'm telling you to throw tons of money at community and hire people. And this is so important. And, this is probably what you really came here for, was to understand the why behind it. And why would you even think of doing that? So the way that I look at community, and even as an industry that we look at community, is that it is a hub and it has spokes out to different parts of the business. And I think that this is really important, and a shift that we're going to see within the community industry is not folding it under one of these teams. Because when you take community and you fold it under, let's say, marketing or support, your community is going to, or your community strategy will skew towards those goals. But community has impact across the business. And so you want to lift it, you want to elevate it so that it ties directly to your top business goals versus, focusing on something like marketing or support, because you can see all of these different ways that you can have ROI across the business with community. A couple examples. I've talked a lot about product, in terms of getting ideas for the product and getting them to the product team, but even beta testing is a great one. There's really great experts in your community that you can identify quickly because of the way they're contributing to the community. So having them test and give feedback on your products. I'll talk a little bit more about customer success and support, but even in marketing. Let's say you have an annual big conference that your company is doing. generally, most of your customers are going to want to hear from other people that are using your products. And the community is a great place to go if you want to do a call for speakers to get really interesting content and speakers from the community that are actually using your products every day. And you, again, will know how to identify them because they're top contributors in your community. But another thing is just being able to use them as a sounding board too. You know, they're really invested in your business and going to these different events and participating. And so if you've got, you know, a lineup of content and you want to get some feedback on it, or if you have different activities that are going on, you know, at this event, they can give feedback on that. And it's just good to have another set of eyes that's not so close to everything that you're working on. And I said before, you can have them sign an NDA if you're really digging into stuff that you don't necessarily want everybody to know right away. But that feedback becomes really important. You think about like PR nightmares that maybe could have been avoided in certain situations if a community had had a look at it beforehand, or a small subset of the community had had a look at things beforehand. So, you know, getting that stuff past your community, having them look at it, having them give feedback, you know, even something like something new you're launching with the product, and you get that to your community for their feedback. You know, I think that that's a great use case, because if you have those conversations with them early and you say, this is what we're doing with the product, and they say, oh, we don't like that, these are the reasons why, your product team can hear that, obviously, and should take that feedback. If you're going to ask for feedback, you damn well better use it. But then your product team takes that feedback, and if they can't make those things happen, they can go back to the small group and explain, these are the reasons why we had trade-offs to make, whatever. But when that feature or new product or whatever it is comes out and the rest of your community or the rest of your customers react, they will be your fiercest advocates out in the world, explaining to everybody, well, there were trade-offs, or, well, you know, we presented this idea and they came back with this. So that's a really important piece of this too, is it just gives you really amazing advocates as long as you treat them the way they deserve to be treated, which is taking their feedback and listening to it and closing the loop. A lot more there, but I won't go on too much about it because we've still got some other goodies here, if it wants to click through. Okay, there we go. So look at the numbers. This stuff is really interesting. Obviously, if you're trying to sell the value of community, you want to start a community at your company. So these are actual numbers from a business, a large company that I worked at. So we'll just walk through them. So driving company growth and ROI. These are customers that were in the community and they had a very basic level of engagement. The way that we looked at it is if they liked something over the past 6 months. Now, liking something in an online community is one level of engagement, or going to a user group is a completely different one. Like I said, instead of leaving work and going home, they're going to talk about your product. So you have to imagine these numbers are amplified so much more when you look at those programs. But for now, this is a very basic level of engagement, which is they liked something in the last 6 months. So we noticed that the customers that fit that description in the community were worth 2 times more pipe to us as a business. We got 2 times bigger deals from those customers. They had 33% higher product adoption at their companies and 3 times lower attrition. The attrition one, I just love so much, because I think that that's obviously so important to a business, is keeping your customers, and the community does make a huge difference in doing that. Waiting for the slides to advance again. Okay. So here's another look at the numbers for support. Now remember, I was at a very large company, so keep that in mind as you look at these numbers, but we had 4,000 questions that were asked on the forums every single month. 83% of those questions were answered by other people in the community. And then we had one support person whose part-time job it was to answer all the questions that didn't get answered in the community. We created an algorithm for this to really understand what we were looking at in terms of dollars, and that was $2 million a month in support deflection. We would have to hire a lot of people to be able to cover what was being covered by the community answering questions, which is amazing. So $24 million a year. Still waiting for them to advance. Sorry, y'all. Did I click it? Okay. There we go. All right, so a couple last thoughts. I just had to get a Hamilton GIF in here somehow. So not really related to anything, but a couple last thoughts on community. This one's really, really important. The day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. Community takes a while to build. It's not a situation where if you build it, they will come. If you already have a really engaged audience through newsletters and social media, and you have channels to be able to get them into your community, you'll have a lot faster luck, I guess. You'll be able to get people in a lot faster. But if you don't, then you're really building from scratch, and it takes a while. And even if you do have those channels, it takes a while to get engagement going, and then to get to the levels of engagement that I mentioned before, where people are answering tons of questions and all of those different pieces. It does take time. And I talk to marketing teams a lot about this, because it's just a very different concept than marketing. You create a marketing campaign, it gets out in the world, it works or it doesn't work, and you move on. It's not necessarily the same with community. You have a long period of time where you're building, and you can't just throw out stuff in the community all the time for them to try, or new programs, because community is all about building trust. It's them building trust with each other, and then building trust with you as a business. And so if you throw stuff out and it doesn't work, or they spend a lot of time on it, or these different programs that, you say, oh, we're going to start user groups, and they go out and they get their community excited, and they say, oh, never mind, we lost funding, we're not going to do it. You lose a lot of trust with the community, and it's very, very hard to get back. So I cannot stress that enough, is that this is a process that takes a lot of time. I think the biggest investment that you make in community is the time it takes to build it. I have a feeling this one's going to take a second to advance. All right. The other thing about community is that no two communities are ever the same, and you just have to expect the unexpected. So I've been doing this for a really long time, and I really learn new things every day. There are definitely, processes and templates and best practices in community that are standard, or that you can apply, or someone with a lot of experience knows off the top of their head and would start in that direction with any community. But then there are some things that you can't predict. Lots of things that happen because you're dealing with humans, and it's just natural that that's going to happen. So something new happens every day, and this industry is growing. So there's new, products every day, and things that you can learn, and ways that you can improve your community. So I just say expect the unexpected, and that's another really important reason why it's good to have someone with community experience under their belts, because they have really good instincts. Usually after you've been doing this for a while, on what to do when one of these situations arises. And I want to make sure that we have time for questions. And so I won't go into a ton of examples of these, but they definitely happen. They're definitely amusing. If you ever, have a chance to really have a conversation with a community manager or someone in community, you should ask them what their crazy community stories are. And I will leave with that. So I wanted to leave plenty of time for Q&A. Sorry if I rushed through a ton of the info, but let's get started with that, because that's a lot of fun. All right. I think they're getting that set up.
Hi, Holly.
Hi.
That was an awesome presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, actually, because I think this is distracting a little bit.
And your gift game was on point.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All I can strive for.
I love it. All right. So our first question is from Sophia. Should you establish your community values based on your organization or the community?
So I think foundation, your organization fits first, or starts first. So you start by focusing your values, or kind of building your community based on those values. Your community will evolve, and they will create their own values. Generally, that ends up feeding back to your company. So they kind of play off of each other. So, if as a company, you've got these very specific values that you're focused on, and they bring that into the community, and the community builds and builds and builds on that. Let's use the diversity and inclusion example first. Even, if that's not a stated value of yours, but the community is really pushing in that direction and focusing on things that they can build in the community that advance that, you'll see that show up in your company as well, because they will start pushing for it. You'll see it show up in your product and your hiring, all of those different pieces. So you influence the community influences you. It's kind of a never-ending cycle.
Awesome. All right. We just had a bunch come in. So let me go up here.
How much time do we have left? Just curiously.
About 10 minutes.
Okay, great.
So this next one is from Matt Creel. He asks, what parts of this process do you think would be most applicable to a middleman customer base that works with both you and your competitors? Brand loyalty can be low there because your customer, the middleman, needs to use whatever system their customer requires, their end customer requires.
Okay. Do you think it would be most applicable to middleman customer base? I see. So middleman, not being middle management, but being like a reseller or something. Brand loyalty can be low. So, I'll use Salesforce as an example. Salesforce has a huge ecosystem. And so in the ecosystem, there's ecosystem partners and they're resellers or partners that are building with the Salesforce products, and they're using other products too. They're building with Salesforce as a CRM, but Marketo is what they're using to track and manage emailing. So I think, it's tying to that brand. I mean, those are their businesses. They own those businesses. And so tying that, their companies to a brand that's really valuable only helps their company. If they're associated as a silver partner with Salesforce or, a platinum partner, that gives them that status that they want, that makes them, more valuable to their customers. And so we saw a lot of people in the top contributors program at Salesforce that were also partners, and we had to differentiate, like, are they doing this as part of their, this contribution as part of their business, or are they doing it as a community member, before we could put them in the top contributors program. And it was a mix of both, but we saw a lot of really great contributions coming from people that were partners and resellers, even if they were working on different products, because they want to be regarded as the experts in every way possible.
Awesome. Thanks for that thorough answer. All right. The next one here is from Joseph Stern. Can you talk about interesting examples using video to build community?
I think if I can think of any examples, we really haven't, in my time at the companies that I've been at, used video necessarily. But I think that we'll start seeing more of it now that we're in this virtual environment, at least for a while. I think obviously we've got all of these things that are going on with virtual groups and Zoom and events like this that are happening in person. And so, it's not all going to happen live necessarily. And I think that you're going to see an influx of that as part of the community world. How businesses are going to leverage that, I don't know yet. Obviously there's some really interesting metrics and tracking that go with that. And obviously it's a great channel for content for the community, but how people connect with each other necessarily with video as part of the community, I don't know yet, but it'll be interesting to see. And we're kind of seeing it now with different apps that are doing voice community too, learning what those look like and how those get moderated. And that's been really interesting to watch as well. So if you're interested in video community, I'd also keep an eye on these audio communities too.
What is an audio community?
Like Clubhouse. Clubhouse is a good example of that.
Okay.
And so they're building this community, and it's just, as I said, moderators sometimes use AI as they're thinking about how they want to flag things in the community or review things. And it's just a new challenge if you're building community through voice versus, text for online.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another one here from Lara Shankar. How does a new product identify the consumers that might join their early influencer community?
It's a great question. So I think it really depends on your product. Obviously you're going to be doing a lot of research before you're building a product and understanding who your audience is. So just like you would, start figuring out how you would find, new customers for a product is the same way that you would find, people that, are interested, in your community as well. So you bring all these new customers in, they're interested in your product, you will know pretty fast who's going to be more engaged with you, because you're having those conversations with them. They start being really interested and invested in your product. They start wanting to give feedback in your product. So you don't necessarily have to have some kind of formalized top contributors program in the beginning. It actually benefits you to wait because you know off the top of your head who you would cherry pick out of your customers to be a part of that. And then before you even build that top contributors program, you'd go to them to get their feedback on it too. I think feedback, you have to do that with every step of the way with building a community. And so, it's just cherry picking the people that are connecting with you and your team and care the most about the product or give the most feedback about the product, and then talk to them about how they would like to see a top contributors program or an influencer program or community be built out for them.
Awesome. All right. We have another one here from Trey Carico. What are the best community platforms for new startups?
There's so many community platforms right now, and it's growing. And it depends on what kind of community you're going to build or what elements of your community you're going to build first. So are you starting with user groups, or are you wanting forums? You have to really think about what your needs are and what your goals are first before you even start looking at platforms. So what I like to do is do a vendor scorecard. So I think about all the things that I want out of a platform, and I prioritize them. Like how important is it to me that I get all of these different things out of the platform, or can I buy something else that will integrate to do this, all those different pieces. And then I start talking to vendors, and I can see what of my important things a vendor, has that can give me what I need out of their platform or not. I assign different weights to them too. So maybe a vendor has, a feature that I need, but it's not that great. And then I go to the top three scores, and I review those again. So I go through those with my team or against the business goals. I weigh pricing, all those different pieces. But I think it starts with you determining what the most important elements are to you. And I will say, don't forget about metrics. Don't forget about some kind of platform where you can measure your success, or your community. You won't get resources. It will stop very quickly. So that's the most important thing I think I would mention to you on that.
Yeah. So let's talk about metrics for a little bit here. In my experience, while we all know that data leads the way, it's usually the last thing prioritized one of a little lower down the priority list. From your point of view in the community, position drives so much in value for an organization. What is the value of metrics? What should startups be tracking this early?
So the first thing that I look at baseline is just the health of the community. So in the beginning, you're not going to be able, or it's very rare that you're able to look at customer success when you're just starting a community. So the first thing is just health, and honestly, health metrics of the community will go on forever. So is the community growing? Where are people coming in from? How can we market the community to get more people in? Are they engaging? How are they engaging? How are they interacting with this content I put out versus this content? So you can actually start to, iterate based on that data that you're getting back from the community to make the community experience even better. So it really is focused on health metrics first, and just understanding who's in your community and what are they doing in your community and how are they getting to your community, how you get more people in the community. And then once you get to a point of maturity with what's going on in your community health-wise, then you can start looking at the next layer of data, and that should tie directly to your business goals. There's always going to be extra, you may not have support deflection as a top-line business goal, but you should try to measure that as well, because it just adds fuel to your fire when you're asking for more resources to continue to grow the program. But definitely baseline, you need to have health metrics to see how your community is growing, how people are getting there, and what they're engaging with.
What if you're starting from zero, right? You're a company, you maybe raised a friends and family round, you're just starting to socialize. Is that a good time to start building a community, or do you wait until longer in the life cycle?
It really depends. I started building community. Venafi's been around a while, and they started seeing a need for community right after they had their first customer event that people just were glued to each other. They wouldn't stop talking to each other. They were so excited to meet other people that did what they do. So it was kind of far down the line for them. And I think that they probably could have done a customer event way earlier and found success, or a community way earlier and found success. So it really depends. It depends on the product that you're building too. But if you need and want your community to be giving feedback on your product early on, community can start very, very small. And you can start with a small group of people that would be in your audience that have some ownership and are building with you from the beginning. And that eventually grows into something bigger. So in terms of data on them, it's just, are they engaging with you? Are they giving you feedback? How is that feedback being used in the product? And, you know, even just rating their experience as participating in even the tiniest community that they're working with you in, I think is a really good measurement to look at in the beginning.
Awesome. Great advice. So we have about a minute left. We have one more question from Trey again. He wants to know, do you have a sample vendor scorecard? And I'll asterisk that by saying like 3 people have asked if you will post these slides.
I will post these slides somewhere. I gotta figure out where. I will post these slides and sample vendor scorecard. I do have one actually. So I can put that with the slides. I know we're right out of time. So like I said, my blog is hollyfirestone.com and it's got tons of information about this stuff. Maybe I can post the slides. It makes sense for me to post the slides and the vendor scorecard there. On Twitter, I'm Holly Firestone. So if y'all have more questions, just tweet at me. I'm happy to answer them. I'm, you know, happy to just jump in and, you know, answer any questions that y'all have. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Those are probably the 2 best places, or connect on LinkedIn or something like that. But happy to help answer any questions that y'all might have.
Awesome. Love it. And you know, another step for you, but when it is posted, if you tweet at Austin Startup Week, they'll tweet it out too. So if you
even better.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye. Bye. All right. So thank you very much to Holly for spending the time here with us. And I also want to thank all of our audience members for those great thought-provoking questions. Now we're going to transition into networking in Hopin. To network with other attendees, press the networking icon on the left-hand side of your screen. You will be randomly paired with another attendee, and we'll have 5 minutes to chat with one another. If you'd like to continue your conversation after your session, click the connect button at the bottom of your screen, and you will both receive an email from Hopin that will help you connect with one another later. And I've actually used that feature for a mass challenge event. It's super awesome to just be randomly paired with someone. So enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you here in 15 minutes.